Hello all, Mr. Harper here, and we're going to start a brand new unit today. Cardiovascular system. I gotta admit, this is one of my favorites. I really like talking about it. So you'll notice from the picture here that it includes a couple of things. You can see here, I think everyone knows what that is, your heart. And then there are also these red and these blue tubes that run through your body called blood vessels. And that is the cardiovascular system. It's your heart and blood vessels and the blood that flows through it. So let's jump in. So the circulatory system, or the cardiovascular system, same thing, can be thought of as a transportation system. It moves things in your body. It's a closed system, which means that it's got the heart, the blood vessels, and blood. Blood does not leave the blood vessels or the heart. It circulates in this closed system over and over and over and over again and doesn't get out. So it is a closed system. The heart pumps the blood, and the blood vessels allow blood to circulate all over your body. Everywhere in your body you have blood vessels. You cut yourself and it bleeds, it's because you have cut blood vessels. And there's not an inch of your skin anywhere that you can cut that doesn't bleed. There are more blood vessels in some areas of our bodies than others. For example, our ears have fewer, lobes of our ears have fewer blood vessels than, say, the tips of our fingers. But there's still blood vessels everywhere in your body. Now, I guess that raises the question of why do we need these? Because blood delivers oxygen and nutrients to all of our body cells. It delivers hormones to all of our body cells and removes waste products made by our cells, including carbon dioxide. If you remember clear back to the excretory system, the kidneys filter waste from the blood. The waste are made by the cells and they're carried by the blood to the kidneys, and the kidneys filter that waste out, becomes part of your urine. Carbon dioxide is a waste product that's expelled from our bodies when we exhale through the respiratory system from our lungs. But our cells of our bodies need oxygen and they need nutrients, food, to live, and it's delivered by the blood. So let's start our discussion of the parts of the cardiovascular system by talking about the heart. It's in your thoracic cavity. Remember, your thoracic cavity is your chest. Thoracic cavity has the ribs around it, and the two major organs that are in the thoracic cavity are the heart and the lungs. It's a cone-shaped muscle about the size of your fist. We tend to think of the heart like right in the middle of our chest, but it's not. It's off to the left. And because of that, our left lung is a little smaller than our right lung. And the heart is made of a special muscle called cardiac muscle. You know, we talked about that in the last unit. And cardiac muscle is striated. It's involuntarily controlled. You can't just think about it and make your heart beat or not beat. It's below that level of conscious thought. So let's talk a little bit more about the heart's anatomy. Surrounding the heart is a sac, and that sac is called the pericardial sac. There's a membrane that forms that sac called the pericardium. It surrounds the heart. Now, the heart itself is made of 3 layers. The outside layer is called the epicardium. The middle layer, which is the thickest, is the myocardium, and it is the big muscled walls of the heart. And then there's a thin inner layer called the endocardium. If you want to get a kind of an idea of their thicknesses, here's the epicardium, a small outer protective layer, and then the thick myocardium that is the muscle that does the actual work of the heart, of pumping. And then this thin inner layer called the endocardium. 3 layers to the wall of the heart. Now, your heart has 4 chambers. All mammals have hearts that have 4 chambers or 4 hollow areas that blood passes through. Some animals have a 2-chambered heart, others have 3-chambered hearts, but mammals, we have 4-chambered hearts. So the top 2 chambers, here's one, and here's the other, kind of hidden back here behind this blood vessel, are the atrias. We got the right and the left. Now your heart, you notice something, that the right is on the left and the left is on the right. The heart's left and right is as it's in your body. So the left side of your heart is on the left side of your body closest to your left hand, and the right is on the right side. If you take it out and you lay it on the table in front of you, then it's reversed. Of course, you'd be dead if you did that. So try not to do that, okay? So anyway, The left and the right atria receive blood. All right? They receive blood from the body. Now, what's the difference between an atria and atrium? An atrium is one, atria is plural. Now, the left, below that are two more chambers, and those are the ventricles. You notice the ventricles are bigger because blood comes into the heart on the atria. They're coming in here, and it's coming in over here too. And then it leaves the heart from the ventricles, and the ventricles pump the blood out of the heart. Those chambers are separated down the kind of middle here by a wall called the septum. And you notice that the right side of the heart has blood that is blue, and the left side has blood that is red. This blue blood is low in oxygen, and this red blood is high in oxygen. The heart has valves. The purpose of the valves, they're in a couple of places. There are valves between the atria and the ventricles, and the purpose of the valves is to open and let blood through, and then to close so that it can't go backwards again. And there are little cords called chordae tendineae that pull the valves open and closed. Think about your sink at your house. You go to the sink, you turn the faucet, and water comes out. There's a valve in there. That valve opens and lets the water out. And then you turn the handle again, and that valve closes and water doesn't come out anymore. That's what a valve is. It can open and close. And you have valves in your heart. So to go back here, here's a valve right here. This valve can open and let blood go from the right atrium into the right ventricle, and then close so that blood can't go backwards. Likewise, the left atrium has a valve right here that can open and let blood into the left ventricle, and then close so it can't go back. And there are cords, these little pieces here, these are the chordae tendineae that pull to open this valve and pull here to open this valve. So what happens is it pumps forward, and then the valve shuts, and that way when this chamber pumps, it forces blood out this direction and not back up this way, or forces blood in this direction. This blood vessel right here connects underneath of this one, so that blood goes out this way and not forces back up in this direction. This is called a cardiac output. If these valves don't close correctly, then your cardiac output, or the amount of blood that your heart pumps out, is lower, and then you have a low cardiac output. You start to have bad symptoms from that. And we can actually use surgery to repair these valves. So, to move forward back, the couple of valves, there are two atrioventricular valves. Now listen, that's a big word, but all it means is it's between the atria and the ventricles, and that's what we call it. You hear the word atrium in that atrio. So the left atrium has a valve called the bicuspid valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The right atrium has a valve called the tricuspid valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And the reason why they're called bicuspid and tricuspid, I don't think we can see it in this picture, but this valve has three pieces. It's called the tricuspid. This one has two pieces. It's called the bicuspid. And then there are also some valves that are called semilunar valves. They're between the ventricles and arteries. So the right ventricle has a valve called the pulmonary valve. That's a semilunar valve. And the left ventricle has a valve called the aortic valve. That's a semilunar valve. They're shaped differently than these valves, these atrioventricular valves, and that's why we call them different. So look at this. This blood vessel right here, it has a main trunk, and then it splits into two. It's called the pulmonary artery. The reason why it's called the pulmonary artery and the reason why it's split into two is because when blood leaves here, it goes to the lungs. Pulmonary means lungs. So this side is going to one lung. This side's carrying blood to the other lung. This valve right here is a semilunar valve. It's called the pulmonary semilunar valve. We're just going to call it the pulmonary valve. So when blood comes into the heart here, when this right atrium contracts, it forces blood to the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. And then the tricuspid valve shuts. When the right ventricle contracts, it forces blood through this semilunar valve into the pulmonary artery to take the blood to the lungs. Now, when the right ventricle contracts, this tricuspid valve is closed, so blood is forced here and doesn't go back here. We don't want it to go backwards. We want it to keep moving forward. Now you notice that all of this blood is blue. And like I said earlier, this means that blood is low in oxygen. This blood is returning from the body on two veins. This is called your superior vena cava and your inferior vena cava, and they're both dumping blood into the right atrium. These two largest veins in your body return blood from your body low in oxygen. Now, why is it low in oxygen? It's low in oxygen because all the cells of your body have taken the oxygen out to use it to live. So now the blood is coming back to the heart. It comes to the right side, to this right atrium, through the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle, from the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery is going to take the blood to the lungs. Now, why is it going to the lungs? It's going to the lungs because it's low in oxygen, and the lungs are where it's going to get oxygen. Because when we inhale, where does that air go? It goes into our lungs. Okay. Now, these big blue guys are veins, and they carry blood that is low in oxygen. The definition of a vein is a blood vessel that brings blood to the heart. Right? It's bringing blood to the heart. Now, this blood vessel is an artery. It carries blood low in oxygen. It's the only artery that does. But it's an artery because the definition of an artery is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart. It's carrying it away from the heart to the lungs. And they've colored it red on the outside here because all arteries in our body are red to represent that they carry high oxygen blood, like this one here. But the pulmonary artery is an exception. The pulmonary artery is the only artery in your body that carries blood that is low in oxygen. And the reason why it carries blood low in oxygen is because it's taking the blood to the lungs to get oxygen. It's the only artery that does this. Now, once the blood has gotten oxygen in the lungs, it's going to return to the heart. Now, these two blood vessels right here, these are called the pulmonary veins. And this picture doesn't show it, but there's also two pulmonary veins over here. They are bringing blood from the lungs, two from the right lung, two from the left lung, and they all dump into this chamber, the left atrium. You notice the two holes here where these two are carrying blood in, and there are two holes over here, but they're not showing you the two blood vessels that cut behind the heart to dump blood into the left atrium. You notice the blood is high in oxygen because it's red now. That's because it's returning from the lungs. These are called veins because they're bringing blood from the lungs and they're bringing blood to the heart. Veins are blood vessels that bring blood to the heart, like this superior and inferior vena cava are bringing blood from the body to the heart. The pulmonary veins are bringing blood to the heart. The pulmonary veins are the only veins in your body that carry blood high in oxygen. All the other veins carry blood low in oxygen, but they're carrying blood high in oxygen because they're coming from the lungs. So blood comes into the left atrium high in oxygen, goes in the left ventricle through the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve shuts, the left ventricle contracts, and blood is forced through this valve, called the aortic valve, into the largest artery of your body, called the aorta. Aorta will then carry blood out to all the parts of your body to get oxygen. So we've talked about the heart and the big parts of the cardiovascular system, the heart, blood vessels, and blood. We'll talk more next time.